Embraer has three main product lines: commercial for passenger, executive and military. But now the company will expand it, debuting new segments, which will diversify its portfolio and consequently increase the company size and revenue. See what's coming up. Cargo airplane. During the pandemic, the aviation industry suffered a huge impact on passenger transportation. According to ICAO, an UN agency specialized in aviation, by 2020, airlines suffered a steep fall around 60% on total transported passengers, experiencing terrible financial losses. The year after started a slow recovery, bringing the decline from that 60% to 49% compared to pre-pandemic year, and for 2022 is expected a further recovery, reducing the decline to between 26 and 36%, although uncertainty hangs over the aviation once again due to global inflation. But air freight saw a different picture. While in 2020 passenger transportation was suffering all over the globe, cargo was increasing its total number of flights, showing an increment over 26,000 flights in relation to previous year. Even considering that in May 2020, cargo flights had a fall of almost 20% in relation to previous year, which highlights how important and strong this niche has been. This year, cargo flights kept outstanding figures above the pre-pandemic era, although in May again, the flights dropped 13% from what it was averaging. It might be seasonal fact or, as ICAO says, a reflex due to the war in Ukraine. We will know the real reason in the future. During this fatidic period of our history, supply chains were struggling with an increasing demand that met difficulties all around the globe. But why air freight have been in such demand since the pandemic? Supply chains had to deal with the accelerated shift from consumption habits that abruptly moved from buying in physical stores into buying in online marketplaces. People couldn't go out shopping, and those who previously were unwilling to shop online were experiencing it for the first time. New business went online, and those that already were connected just increased its sales through the platform. And according to the United Nations Conference on Trade and Development, after the pandemic, the e-commerce participation on consumption kept increasing. Cargo ships were queuing in the ports to unload. The logistics weren't able to return the empty containers, and a ship blocking the Suez Canal slowed down what couldn't be slowed down. Ships were transporting goods over its capacity, and the prices were and still are no longer competitive in relation to air freight prices, which delivers goods much faster, thus making a slot in an airplane rather disputed. Then came the vaccine delivery rush, putting more pressure on the logistics all over the globe, and to help in this urgent demand, some airliners started to adapt its grounder airplanes to transport cargo. Azul, the Brazilian airliner, was one of those companies that helped to deliver vaccine in its country using grounded passenger airplanes, becoming the first company in the world to partially convert an Embraer 195 for cargo. With this experience, the company learned that Embraer 195s offers a great cargo capacity with a significant fuel economy and ground support at most airports with almost no restrictions. So, through Azul Cargo Express, the company decided to contract an engineering company for a full conversion of its Embraer, and recently the airplane was completed and got the first flight certification for an Embraer 195 in the world. Observing all the new dynamics in the global economy, which brought a steady demand increase for air freight, and observing the successful case of its country customer, Azul, Embraer saw a new opportunity for its commercial aircrafts, the 190s and the 195s, developing a freighter version from them which could be placed in an existing gap between large and narrow bodies and the turboprop airplanes, ideal for same-day and decentralized delivery, offering more cargo capacity and speed than the turboprops, with a fuel consumption from about 30% lower than narrow bodies like Boeing 737s and Airbus A320s and A319s. With this new product ready to the production line, Embraer also launched a retrofit program for the existing 190s and the 195s, enabling full conversion for existing planes flying today. In this first phase, Embraer will use its E-Jet plant in São José dos Campos, Brazil, which already produces both aircraft models. The company made a forecast of about 12 units per year, but if they succeed, they might build another plant in the United States. Until the day I wrote the article to produce this video, Embraer had received an order for full conversion of 10 E-Jets, but the customer's name has not been disclosed yet. Turboprop. Embraer started its history with the development and production of a turboprop, the EMB 110 Bandeirantes, which built the case to found the company. After the Bandeirantes, Embraer had 3 other turboprops on its history, by which only 2 went into production, having great acceptance by the market. All 4 models totaled 963 units produced, by which 498 was from the Bandeirantes within civil, cargo and military variants, aimed to be low cost and serve remote and regional areas with precarious infrastructure. It was an aircraft propelled by 2 Pratt Whitney PT-6A and had the capacity to carry until 21 passengers and 2 pilots, a maximum takeoff weight of 5,670 kilos and a range about 1,025 nautical miles, cruising at 260 knots. The second model was the EMB 121 Xingu, an aircraft designed with executive and military variants, which used the same wing design and engines from the Bandeirantes. The model had the capacity to carry up to 9 passengers and 2 pilots. It had the same maximum takeoff weight from the Bandeirantes, with maximum cruise speed of 242 knots at a range of 1,268 nautical miles. 106 units were produced. The last turboprop by Embraer was the EMB 120 Brasileira. This aircraft was designed for regional flights with the capacity to carry up to 30 passengers. The aircraft used the same design concept from Xingu's fuselage, wings, pressurization, and more powerful PT-6 engines. In 1994, the model was the most operated aircraft for regional flights all around the globe, and had a high safety record, receiving a special safety award from the FAA. At this time, the Brasileira was the fastest, most economic and the lightest regional aircraft for 30 passengers. It had the maximum takeoff weight of 1,980 kilos and a maximum cruising speed of 315 knots and a range around 1,400 nautical miles. In the future, its design helped Embraer to develop the ERJ aircraft. Besides, the Brasileira served as a badge to the development of an advanced prototype with aftermounted engines on pusher configuration, the CBA 123 Vector, which gave to Embraer some experience in such kind of engine configuration. Due to changes in the company's strategies after going private and due to financial difficulties, the project of the CBA 123 Vector and the turboprop production were discontinued, and all the resources were directed towards the development and production of the ERJ aircrafts. Today the market is showing a demand for aircraft with 50 seats for regional aviation, which would connect smaller regions to larger communities with a range until 1,000 nautical miles and vice versa, as well as connecting those smaller regions between themselves. Such market demands smaller and fuel-efficient aircrafts, but today it's only possible to find mainly 2 models, which designs are outdated and they are not much fuel-efficient by today's requirements. Not to mention that they inspire a sense of unsafety and discomfort in the passengers. They are the ATR-42, its bigger variant, the 72, and the Havilland-8400. Disregarding both aircrafts, the only option available would be narrow-body jets, which have more seats than necessary, consume much more fuel than a turboprop, and sometimes have limitations to operate at certain airports. Despite the Havilland had stopped its production, arguing that a continuation will happen at the sight of new demands in post-pandemic years, ATR have a backlog of over 190 aircrafts, proving that the demand already exists. Embraer see a market size of around 1,008 new turboprops worldwide, led by Asia Pacific and China. However, the companies say that demand in North America might be bigger than the expectations. So, with this picture, Embraer decided to revive its turboprop segments, developing a new project, and the business case is expected to be concluded by the end of this year and approved by the first quarter of 2023. But what will this new airplane look like? As the business case for this new aircraft is still under development, some of the information here might change during the course. So it's important to highlight that all we know is based on primary information released by the company. The new aircraft would share the fuselage with the E-Jets, with two variants. So, at this point, we see a synergy with the existing production line in São José dos Campos and suppliers. The variants would be one with 70 seats and other with 150 seats. For a while they are named TP70 and probably TP150. The TP70 would be a fit for US customers which would choose a configuration with 50 seats separated in two classes, although the TP70 could be configured in three classes with 50 seats. The TP150 would focus on low-cost company for short hauls with bigger capacity, but the company have not decided about which variant will be the first to debut. This decision depends on market factors. The new airplane will have aftermounted engines, and this is a very strategic design decision, because such configuration would future-proof the aircraft for a possible hydrogen version. This is exactly what you've heard. Embraer plans to launch a hydrogen version of its new turboprop. And since hydrogen is better contained on cylindrical tanks, it couldn't be stored at the wings, but in the rear section of the fuselage, hence the advantage of having the engines after-mounted. But we will talk more about it later. An immediate advantage of having engines in such configuration is that you have much more comfort inside the cabin, as all the noise and vibrations generated by the engines and by the propellers will stay behind the passengers. The three major engine manufacturers, GE, Pratt Whitney and Royce, have offered their engines for this project. They are all bidding new technologies, and Rolls-Royce would have offered its first turboprop engine project. All suppliers bid engines considering the burn of 100% sustainable aviation fuel, and the hydrogen model would have been considered as well. But this type is only to the next decade, as we will see later. The TP70 and TP150 are expected to have a range of about 800 nautical miles, and the cruising speed has not been formed yet. Embraer is now defining suppliers and performing tests with its concepts. Investments in the development continues throughout this year, and the company, as previously mentioned, is expecting to have its business case finalized by the end of this year and get the approval by the first quarter of the next year. Then it will go to secure investments to fund the production. If all goes well and as planned, the new aircraft will enter service between 2027 and 2028, ahead of the ATR eVTOL. The existing urban air transportation platform is entirely based on a variety of helicopters, expensive machines with a great level of mechanical complexity that requires constant inspection, checks and maintenance every 25, 50 and 100 hours of use, or at a certain short number of landings called cycles. The number vary according to the specification of each manufacturer. This type of aircraft consumes a considerable amount of fuel, and in some cases it is higher than a fixed-wing aircraft of the same weight or payload capacity, and produces a considerable amount of noise, which in urban areas is a concern, facing problems with noise regulations that stipulates where and which hour of the day helicopters can fly. So much restrictions, complications and costs make the helicopter a very expensive means of transportation, being mainly used by executives and people with higher income than the average. So, in 2009, NASA published a video of a conceptual design for an individual electric vertical takeoff and landing vehicle. the puffing eVTOL. The agency surprised the world when presented its design, which quickly became viral on the internet. The idea was to propose a solution for the noise generated by helicopters on urban areas. NASA concept would be capable to fly with a noise 10 times quieter than the quietest helicopter on that time. Such proposition was made possible due to the advancements on batteries, electric engines and controllers. During this project, NASA used the new technologies, such as the distributed electric propulsion, which distributes the propulsive airflow over the aerodynamic surfaces of the aircraft, usually in the wingspan of a fixed wing, benefiting with better fuel efficiency, energy efficiency in this case, steep climbing for short takeoff and landing, and the elimination of control surfaces for pitch, roll and yaw, and the noise reduction of course. NASA also introduced further technologies such as redundant electric powertrain system and others. It didn't take long for the private sector to get interested on this idea. It was clear that an eVTOL would not only bring noise reduction to communities, but it would solve the issues with high operational costs from helicopters, and above all, would bring air transportation much closer to the general population, because once you get lower operational costs and lower acquisition prices for an aircraft, you can sell a flight ticket by a fraction of the price charged today, and it could be translated into a jump in demand. Just to give you one insight into the price differences, Embraer estimates that a flight ticket price per mile in an on-demand category like ride-sharing would be between $3 to $4. Meanwhile, a flight ticket for a Robinson 44 on a ride-sharing category on demand in a company in New York, one of the few helicopters ride-sharing available on demand in the world, goes from $14 to $16 per mile, and vary according to the fuel price float. Usually, a Robinson 44 ticket on a conventional flight where you pay for the aircraft per hour would cost about $67 per mile. Understanding the potential for eVTOLs over helicopters, over 150 startups emerged and massive investments are flowing into this segment. Via its startup, EV Air Mobility, Embraer is investing in the development of its electric vertical takeoff and landing aircraft, with all the infrastructure necessary to the operation, including regulation, frameworks for aerospace design and management, and services. The startup was founded in October 2020 by Embraer X, the innovation division of Embraer that presented its eVTOL concept in 2018. Their electric vertical takeoff and landing was named the EV, and so far, the aircraft will be capable of carrying one pilot with 4 passengers plus baggage, and will be wheelchair-friendly. Information like cruising speed and range have not been disclosed. However, in 2017, Embraer's startup announced that they were partnering with Uber, and Uber's requirements at that time for their future eVTOLs were to have a capability to cruise at 130 knots, with a range about 96 kilometers, and cruising altitude between 2,000 and 3,000 feet. This new vehicle is expected to be equipped with 8 electric propellers and engine redundancies, to have a 5th generation fly-by-wire system, and to rely on data links rather than voice communications, which is an important characteristic for electric urban air mobility due to the expected high volume on the air traffic within its flight level. The expected weight is about 1 ton, and batteries would be exchangeable within 5 minutes on the vertiport or skyport, the location where these new aircraft will take off and land. In early 2022, EV completed its merge with Zenith Acquisition Corp, and it brought a sum of $377 million, which was added to the development of the aircraft. And in May, EV was listed in the New York Stock Exchange under the ticker EVAX and EVAXW. The company until that date had received a total order of 1,825 vehicles from 19 different customers all over the globe, through a non-binding letter, totaling over $5.4 billion. Customers range from helicopter operators, car app companies to couriers and militaries. So far, the efforts have involved multiple partnerships to the development of systems, vertiports, services, commercialization, and even had a partnership with Porsche Consulting to design production and logistics, taking advantage of Porsche's group automotive know-how on those areas. EV is not rushing to be the first to deliver the first eVTOL in the world, and the first delivery is expected to be by 2026. The CEO, André Stein, stated, "We are not rushing to be the first to fly. We are not rushing to be the first to enter the market. We are doing it right." Electric and hybrid electric airplanes. The electrification arrived on airplanes, and it's not necessary to go into details again about how important it is to the sector due to the high participation that fuel prices and technology have in the operational costs of an airplane. Despite electrification still have a lot to evolve since the current technology does not deliver as much volumetric energy density as conventional fuel, what we have available today are already capable to attend some small needs, as demonstrated by Pipistrel, the Slovenian company which was the first in the world to develop a 100% electric aircraft, the Taurus Electro, and is mainly used for training purposes. Further companies have directed their efforts trying to develop regional aircrafts for short hauls in a range about 500 nautical miles, with the capacity for 9 passengers plus crew, as for instance Aviation Alice, that is performing runway tests and the first flight is expected to be in the next quarter. Aviation industries R&D today is mostly betting on detachable batteries, so that an electric airplane does not have to expend incredible amounts of time on the ground for charging, since technology today isn't capable of fast charging. This is the similar idea for most eVTOLs as well. The automotive sector was the first to increase the attention and consciousness about the advantages on electric propulsion, as well as demonstrate that real use requires much more from batteries and management systems than what they can deliver today. The sector has been on the lead on R&D investments for new solutions, and the efforts are intensive to find out how to increase reliability and volumetric energy density, and they have made great leaps every now and then. For instance, according to the Department of Energy's Vehicle Technology Office in the US, the volumetric energy density for lithium-ion battery, the better technology on mass production today, increased significantly since 2008. On that year, lithium-ion battery could store about 55 watt-hour-liter, and in 2020, the figure increased in almost 8 times to 450 watt-hour per liter. The 450 watt-hour per liter would be the best available today, but is yet to go into production. This mark was achieved by a startup in Michigan, US, called Our Next Energy, or ONE for short. They developed a dual chemistry battery, which divides the pack in 2 sections. One section is dedicated to power the engines, while the second is used to energy storage. This battery, called Gemini, uses 60% less graphite and 20% less lithium. Cobalt and nickel were also reduced, but the company didn't disclose the amount. The battery cells are different as well. They have a prismatic form. The cathode is used as a protective casing, and the anode is insulated and attached on one end. And all of it translates into weight reduction. Just for your reference about how advanced this technology is, the volumetric energy density for a Tesla Model 3 with 2170 cylindrical cells is 260 watt-hour per liter. The Gemini battery will equip BMW iX model at the end of this year. Further technology alternatives are being researched not only to solve volumetric energy density, but also to solve further problems such as charging time, overheating, and occasionally instant fire and so on. Of course, all this benefits aviation with the possibility of have better energy storage without changing the aircraft designs yet to the build and increasing its life cycle and operational capabilities. Embraer has not been standstill about the R&D related to this important alternative for fuel and operational costs. They envisioned aircraft which would be able to operate in a hybrid configuration as well as 100% in electrical propulsion in one variant. To develop these airplanes was created a program called Energia, focused on the R&D for fuel-efficient solutions with efforts ranging from sustainable aviation fuel technologies, electric propulsion systems, more aerodynamic airframes to hydrogen technologies. Through the Energia program, Embraer created a timeline for the expected introduction of each concept in the market. The first airplane to be introduced will be a hybrid plane which will be based on the new turboprop with design changing the wings and elevator. It will be called Energia Hybrid E9HE. The purpose here is to mix the better of electric and combustion technologies, and for a while this aircraft will be able to cover 500 nautical miles, carrying 9 passengers plus crew, with 60% less noise than today's standard and 90% less CO2 emissions. As the disadvantages of full electric propulsion systems, which we've previously mentioned, are much more significant in airplanes than in terrestrial vehicles, Embraer decided to combine technologies in order to bring better range and payload while it reduced significantly fuel consumption. The fuel in this application would be the environmentally friendly sustainable aviation fuel. 5 years later, in 2035, Embraer Energia aims to debut the first full electric airplane, the E9FE, a high wing with tail-mounted counter-rotating propellers capable of flying 200 nautical miles, carrying 9 passengers plus crew. Its design will be inspired by gliders, having a long wingspan for better lift and narrow fuselage at the rear. This concept is expected to be about 8% less noisy. This is the first and only full electric airplane in the hall of developments for the future. Of course, I'm not counting EV, the electrical vertical takeoff and landing vehicle, as it is on another category. Here, I'm only talking about airplanes. Possibly, as the battery technologies keep evolving, bringing much more volumetric energy density, faster recharging, less weight and more reliability, new full electric airplanes project might come from Embraer, and even the E9FE will have a better range by only replacing the batteries for a better and more advanced models. But let's take a look at further variants from Energia program. Hydrogen fuel cell and hydrogen gas turbine. The future for alternative propulsion for air transportation is clearly not based exclusively on 100% electric solution, at least not at this point. Within Energia program, Embraer is developing its first hydrogen-powered airplane using fuel cell, the E9H2FC, which will be introduced by 2035. The concept is expected to have an electric propulsion, but powered by hydrogen through a fuel cell, which generated energy would be stored on batteries. The fuel cell is being designed and tested specifically for this aircraft. It brings its challenge since this technology has its own complexity and doesn't represent too much weight reduction. This is the first hydrogen variation adapted from the new turboprop that Embraer is developing and working to have its business case finished by the end of this year and approved by the beginning of the next year. Few modifications will be made in order to give the turboprop a hydrogen variation. As hydrogen is best stored in cylindrical containers rather than square ones, the fuel tanks in the wings will be removed and the rear section of the airplane will give way to hydrogen cylinders, while sleeker, cleaner and more aerodynamic wings will be used. Elevators and propellers will be changed as well by designs with better aerodynamics. The E982FC would be able to fly about 200 nautical miles, carrying up to 19 passengers plus crew, with a noise reduction around 70% lower than today's standards. This airplane will also be used as platform for another type of hydrogen system, and this variation is the E50H2GT, a hydrogen and gas turbine airplane. This concept doesn't require fuel cell and an electric engine. Instead, the model will use a modified turbine capable of burning either sustainable aviation fuel or Jet A and hydrogen. Such kind of technology will allow the aircrafts to fly a longer distance, carrying more passengers than the E982FC. The fuel burn management will dedicate 100% hydrogen burn through typical routes, while SAF and Jet A would be used exclusively as reserve and range extender. So, this variant would be capable of carrying up to 50 passengers through a distance of 500 nautical miles. When not using SAF or Jet A, which will be most of the time, CO2 emission will be zero, and the standard noise is expected to be 60% lower than standards. It's clear that all vehicles presented here within alternative propulsion variants will be dedicated to short-haul operators. The E9FE might even attend the general aviation airplanes owners. However, these are the first steps for a cleaner, efficient and accessible air transportation for passengers. The airspace industry is doing its homework, and we might expect broader developments and better capabilities in the course of the time, such like we have seen on the automotive industry. As a good market maker, Embraer is working to diversify its portfolio to guarantee a long-lasting future by bringing new technologies, adhering to changes in the freight market, presenting alternatives, and offering its solution to disrupt urban air transportation. There are more undertakings on the development of military technologies, such as drones and further surveillance solutions, that might add to the company's wealth, but we are not mentioning them in this video. Despite problems with a partnership which crumbled before it be sealed, the company is doing great on its own, showing vision, power to execute and resilience, as it has done since the beginning. If you make it this far, please give it a like, it's important for the channel, and consider subscribing. I hope that you enjoyed the video and see you soon.